So this is John F. Kennedy's 1935 application to Harvard. And it includes his grades at high school and also a response to the essay prompt. Why do you wish to come to Harvard? And this is what he said. This is what an admissions essay would look like in 1935. The reasons that I have for wishing to go to Harvard are several. Okay. Restated the question in the topic sentence. Okay, fine. I feel that's maybe not the best way to start a sentence, but I feel that Harvard can give me a better background and a better liberal education than any other university. I have always wanted to go there, as I have felt that it is not just another college, but it is a university with something definite to offer. What is that? Then, too, I would like to go to the same college as my father. To be a Harvard man is an enviable distinction and one that I sincerely hope I shall attain. April 23rd, 1935, John F. Kennedy. And it's handwritten. He probably just wrote that in one go. It is no doubt much more difficult to get into these schools than it was when I was
Yeah.
applying in the late 90s. And for us, it was much more difficult than it was in the 1930s, where you just hand wrote like a postcard and like mailed it. Yeah.
I feel
Um,
Harvard would be really cool.
yeah, I want to be a Harvard man. Uh, but what do we see here? So first off, there's the legacy acknowledgement. My father went to Harvard. And then also, he doesn't define what it means to be a Harvard man, or that he says the university has something definite to offer. He says it's definite, but he doesn't define it.
Yeah.
And I think it gets at something important about the universities, which is that these students are vessels to be filled. And they're going to go in and be inculcated in WASP ways and post Christian religious monastical ways as well, and come out better people. It's a finishing school, if you
Mhm.
will. And, the university can be a great place for the cognitive elite to sort of hang out and explore different passions. But I think now and definitely then, it was a kind of finishing school in the sense that by senior year, he was going to be a Harvard man. And he doesn't even know what that means as an 18-year-old high school graduate because he hasn't really experienced it. And he hasn't had that professor or that experience at a fraternity or that, office hour session when he learns how to write an essay or something. He hasn't had those experiences, or the time when he plays club football. I mean, he has not really had those experiences and thus isn't a Harvard man yet. So it's about a kind of becoming. And I think that that is a real ideal of the universities. And it's in fact a very good one. It's not about meritocracy. Like you take a test and thus you beat out the people sitting left and right to you. You're like a better test taker. You're smarter. Your IQ's higher. Now you get in here because that's like your reward. It's not about that. It's about you as like putty being formed into a Harvard man. And there were some other aspects of this with even the development of the SAT score. The SAT score is now an object of hatred by the left, but it was to a large extent an effort to allow appreciated talent in the Midwest and South to actually get to Harvard. So you could bring in this test and it could find a diamond in the rough, so to speak. There's this
Mhm.
really smart kid in Nebraska whose dad didn't go to Harvard, but he could become a Harvard man. He has the ability to be inculcated in the WASP ways, and he should be given a chance. And that was actually the motive behind the implementation of the SAT score. It was not an attempted elitism, actually, as it's now thought of, but it was an elitism of a kind because it still was about forming the person into someone else. And so after the 60s and all that went into it, we decided that segregation was not a fair or I would say stable way of doing things. It's creating heartache. It makes us look bad in the Cold War and might very well lead to revolution. So we're going to start finding some diamonds in the rough among the black race. And if that doesn't quite work, we're going to force it to work. And so we're going to engage in affirmative action to create quotas or at least the idea of diversity at these institutions so we can have a well-rounded class. And even in some Supreme Court decisions in the 90s, I remember Sandra Day O'Connor, who affirmed affirmative action in a major ruling, said 20 years from now, we won't even have to be talking about this because at that point, race will have been dissolved. You know, people will be of mixed race. There'll be no stratification between blacks and whites. We'll just be all one. We'll just all be Americans. And so we won't even need affirmative action. We'll wonder why we had it in the first place. But unfortunately, we need it still now because some of these structural issues haven't been fully worked out yet. And we moved 25 years on, and we're at the exact same place. And the stratification is severe. As many have noted, rural white Americans on the SAT are scoring at the level of upper class blacks. So African American whose parents live in wealthy neighborhoods, have good jobs, maybe work for the government, etc., their children are scoring at the levels of trailer park whites. And so we need to do something. And we now had this Supreme Court decision that has overturned these things, students for fair admissions. And I guess it remains to be seen how all of this shakes out. But I would stress this. I at least understand the motive for affirmative action. And affirmative action is maybe you could say coming from a good place. And I know that what many people would rather that I say is that it's anti-white bigotry. And it is to some degree. There's no doubt that it harms a white candidate who's trying to get in. But I'm giving the devil his due here, and I'm trying to properly understand where this type of regime is coming from, as opposed to just polemicizing against it or calling it unfair. There's a well-rounded student, and then there's a well-rounded class. So a well-rounded student would be someone who was a great baseball player, but then also was an engineer and also dabbled in the trombone in the school band. He's just an all-around good guy. And that's the type of student you want. He's not myopic. He's open-minded and well-rounded. You could also claim that you want a well-rounded class. So we want someone to make sure that the theater is always performing great plays. And someone is going to be on advanced physics and they're going to be pursuing that. And another one is going to do photography, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't necessarily want well-rounded students, but we want a well-rounded class. And diversity is part of that, because if you go to an elite university, you have been chosen. And that's not just Harvard. I think that goes for about 100 or so universities in the United States. You have been chosen. It's not just a test taking race. You've been chosen because you are going to be an elite of some kind in the future. That's very intense in the Ivy Leagues. All of our Supreme Court justices, I guess with the exception of Amy Coney Barrett, went to an Ivy League school. But it's actually true for many other universities. They're choosing you in order to form a well rounded class, in order to form a well rounded elite for the broader society. And that's why, if we want to have a society that isn't racially stratified, we would need to bring in some blacks. And if they can't quite score that high, well, we'll give them a nudge just so they're there. And maybe there's some sort of untapped potential in them that deserves recognition. And so this notion that came about in the 70s, but was coming from the tumult of the 1960s, seems to be at an end, actually. It's been overturned by the Supreme Court. Conservatives have hated that type of thing for a while, but now they are really against it. It's lost some legitimacy. The universities themselves have lost legitimacy and prestige. And so we're at an end. And I can't really tell you what's next or what's coming after it. But I fear that what's coming after it is going to look like that table of Asian nerds at a fancy restaurant talking about their credentials. That is, it is the striver types that are really good at test taking and study for the test and maybe cheat. Asians are notorious for that, by the way. And they really want to make some money and they really want to, go to this corporation and maybe that one. And they want to Netflix and chill in their mansion in the burbs at the end of the day. In other words, they have no social consciousness or self reflection whatsoever. They're soulless ants who are really good at solving Rubik's Cubes. And if you're going to knock down both the kind of WASP elitism that founded the universities, at least as we know it, they emerged as monasteries, as I said, or theological seminaries. But the WASP sort of defined them in the sense of that inculcation of a Harvard man. And even in the diversity regime, don't you think that there was at least a little respect paid to the WASP in the sense that, the black guy would wear a black and orange sweater with a tiger on it to, show his bona fides as a Princeton guy or something? Maybe it was all residual, but there was at least a carryover of the waspness of those earlier institutions. Princeton was Presbyterian, of course. And now we're going to destroy all of these traditions on behalf of brown strivers from third or second world populations who have high IQs. And the conservatives are going to cheer this on in the name of meritocracy. Because the conservatives don't get what the university was really about. The university was never about meritocracy, as JFK's essay reveals. The university was about inculcation, which is extremely different than meritocracy. JFK doesn't say, I have the highest test scores and I thus earn my slot. I deserve to be here. He doesn't say that. He says, I am putty in your hands and you're going to turn me into a Harvard man. That's a extremely different world outlook than what we have today. So the conservatives who have grown to hate universities, they hate the wokeness, they hate the feminist, they hate the affirmative action blacks, et cetera, et cetera. In many ways, they have good reason to hate those things. What they are going to do is open up the doors for dead-eyed meritocracy and brown strivers who want to make millions selling fraudulent medical solutions a la Vivek Ramaswamy. And I don't know, call me a reactionary or call me a liberal, but I do find that the affirmative action situation, which at least honored the WASP and at least allowed certainly many white people to attend these universities, is highly preferable to the ant farm of strivers that the universities are becoming. So there's my argument.
Yeah, in my mind, it's absolutely preferable to have, a 10% black population at the school, their hearts in the right place, than Ivy League institutions being majority Asian. I mean, I don't know how conservatives bought into that as somehow good. Like, that's what you want Harvard to look like. They're 4% of the population of the country, and they're going to be, what, 60% of the student body at these elite institutions. I just think that's absolutely crazy. It actually might
Yeah.
lead to overall less white students. If you want to really be racial about it and say whites deserve to be there, then this will probably be worse. Yeah, I always thought, like, of course Harvard or any of these Ivy League institutions want to keep the racial demographics somewhat balanced. They want it to at least to somewhat resemble what the country looks like. That makes more sense rather than just literally being overrun with Chinese and Indians.
You'll like to hear this, RFH, that men have received a tremendous amount of affirmative
That's
action
true.
to roughly maintain the
Yes.
50-50 student body,
Yes.
to offer some sympathy towards men, which of course you're known for, your great sympathy towards the plight of men
Well,
and the rights of men everywhere. Girls are doing much better at high
hmm
school.
hmm
And it's just an environment that sort of works for them and it's not working for men. And I've even heard some outside the box solutions, like men just develop a little bit slower or boys develop a little bit slower. So
hmm
maybe they should apply for college when they're 20 as opposed to 18. They call it a red shirt year. And
hmm
I think that sounds great, actually. But
It's like redshirt
um,
them in kindergarten.
yeah, maybe when
Yeah.
we're 13, we can go to first grade or something like that.
Well, a lot of wealthy families do this. They
Yeah.
hold their sons back a year, and I do think it's good, like before they go to kindergarten.
Definitely, definitely. It is a good idea, I think. And
Yeah.
but regardless, there's affirmative action that directly benefits men and white men as well.
Yes.
In the sense that you want a school that's like 70% Asian and female or something?
It's absurd.
It's kind of weird. You want a bit of the male and female
Yes.
thing.
You
And
want a balance.
yeah, so they're making choices with affirmative action, but
Of course.
every student body is a choice. Like,
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's great if you get into Yale, but you're not more special than someone who didn't get in and is going to like the University of Montana and Missoula right now. I guarantee you that not all of them, but the top five, maybe even the top 10% of the University of Montana or the University of Texas or the University of Missouri or whatever could go to Yale and flourish. But they just, for whatever reason, maybe it's just pure randomness or luck, they weren't part of the chosen. And thus they're not there. So it's never been a pure meritocratic situation. Sorry for the baseball reference, but like your batting average is 350 in AAA. It doesn't matter what you look like or whatever. They're just going to get you to the major leagues, right? It's not like that because it's not a purely objective game. It is about building a society. And so they are inherently going to choose people. And there's some admissions coordinator that chooses a violinist as opposed to a chess player just because that's how they're going to build their student body. And it just is what it is. It's always going to be like that. It's unfair. Luck is a huge component of all these things. But we've just got to get over that. Maybe even baseball isn't the best analogy. It's like track or something. Universities are not track and field teams where there's just like a timer on how fast you can run 100 meters. That is not what it is about. It's never been like that. It's never been about that. And so this quest for meritocracy, I think, is just totally misplaced.